I'm James Ball, the publisher of Security Blend Books, and I'm here with Sarah Aalborg, who wrote Secure by Choice, which covers the cognitive biases that affect security culture and security posture and how risk assessment is done within organizations. Sarah, to kick off with the questions, the first thing I'd like to ask about is you originally transitioned from information science into IT security, and that then led you on this journey to become a CISO. Now, what was it through that inspired you to really focus on the human aspects of cybersecurity?
Well, to be honest with you, it was a frustration because, I kept seeing people knowing what to do, and I kept seeing people telling other people what to do, and nothing happened. You can install all kinds of technical solutions. You can build yourself tons of documents and processes and everything, and yet nothing happens. And I was just, why is that? And having worked with change management in all kinds of IT projects before, I got curious about that. And that led me to my whole journey into the cognitive biases and the subconscious brain. And eventually, this really makes sense. Someone has to have written a book about it, and I couldn't find it. So I wrote it myself.
So how can security professionals make use of your book to help them with the cognitive biases in their own organizations and the damage they can cause? How can it help them to mitigate the limitations that apply? And can it help actually leverage those biases to support security?
Yeah, so first of all, the main thing about all of this subconscious brain and our biases, the main issue is that we don't know we have it. We have no understanding of how much our whole subconscious brain affects us in our daily work. So one of the first thing is to read this book, to just get this aha moment and say, that's why I keep believing that nothing will happen. That's why I end up using the same technical solution time after time. That's why my people in my organization, they don't act when I ask them to. So it gives you that basic understanding. And then there's also this, with the understanding comes a way to mitigate those risks. So how can we leverage? First of all, we have the optimism bias. How can we fight that optimism bias that causes us to believe that the most positive, optimistic outcome of a scenario is the most likely one? That is a bias that is quite scary when you think of it. And then we can use those biases. So we can use the knowledge that people tend to act like they believe the majority of people acts. We can use that in our wording when we're working with our cybersecurity culture, because if you say in our organization, we do these things. So just by framing your communication, you can use that bias and actually get people to have the desired behavior rather than just do as they think. Then we have, other kind of biases that we can work on, the reciprocity bias. And reciprocity is a word that for a Dane like me is very hard to pronounce, but it's really something that we should all leverage in our work, because when we work with a reciprocity, this is about, the feeling when you're invited for a dinner and you want to bring flowers, or you want to bring just something. Arriving at a dinner empty-handed just feels wrong. And that's because we want to give something back to people that give something to us. And we can use that for so many things when we're working with cyber. We can give our interest. We can give just little prizes when we do gamification. But we can also, give a handwritten card when someone does something extraordinary. So a handwritten card, something that shows that I've gone that extra mile, will help us get those people to want to give us something back. And what's more obvious to give back than the thing that we asked them for? Secure behavior. So that's how the book has tons of little examples on practical things that you can do to leverage the biases, and also a lot of information on how they affect us as security professionals as well.
Now that we've spoken about how they affect us and how we can actually use them, so framing and everything else, what the obstacles you've seen when companies are trying to address these biases, when they're trying to look at them or trying to build them into their communication? And how can they deal with that? How can they overcome those obstacles?
Well, first of all, I think that the main obstacle right now is our tendency to believe that knowledge equals action. That, we've been so absorbed about this security awareness thing that you can buy off-the-shelf products doing an e-learning once a year, and then people will magically act securely. So that's an obstacle right now, because we still have that very, very old belief that knowledge equals action. It doesn't. Culture equals action. So we need to transform that into working with a security culture. But that's one of the obstacles I see. And then there's also this obstacle I see, that lots of organizations have the belief that IT security should live in the IT security department. It's not for the management. It's not for the regular people. Those guys over there in IT security should handle that IT security thing. And they don't see themselves as a part of the equation on getting this risk mitigation done. And before we do that, it's very hard to address it. Yeah. So those were some of those obstacles that I have stumbled upon very much in my work.
Now that the book's out, you've physically got copies there. Other people physically have them in their hands.
I've got it right here. Yep, I'm proud on the shelf.
What's next for the whole Secure by Choice brand, the idea, and your own work?
Yeah. So this book was kind of like the beginning. There was a book that I would have wanted to read when I started this whole journey within working with cyber psychology, as some people call it. And now my goal is to get it to live, get it out there. So I've kind of built the framework. So now I'm teaching about how to do this. I've written the book. I'm doing online courses on how to do a strong cybersecurity culture. And I'm also providing, keynotes and speaks and whatever chance I can get to get this message out there and get this framework to live, because it makes so much sense to start mitigating risks by starting with the human beings.
And if people do want to book you to speak or do want to book your training, what's the best way for them to do that?
That would be to go either by LinkedIn. Find me at LinkedIn. I will connect and I will share lots of information just for free. And I also have a blog on securebychoice.com/blog, where I do, further writings, because this was just one tiny book. I have so much more to say. So I keep blogging. I think like at least once a month, there's a new blog post on a bias to know about, or some way we could work with cyber psychology within cyber.
Since the book was launched, you've actually sold quite a lot of copies, particularly for a new author. But what I want to ask is, how does it feel to meet your readers, and just to pick out what's been your best interaction with one so far?
Well, it was downright scary. To be honest, I was like, okay, we need to sell this. And as soon as, we had the first sale of the book, I realized that someone's going to read it. And I was hit big time with the imposter syndrome, saying, oh, who am I to write a book? And they're going to read it and they're going to find all kinds of mistakes and errors in the book. And it was really, really scary. But now people have been so kind. The cybersecurity community is just a bunch of loving people. And there's so much support, and the people are being so kind to me when they buy the book or when they recommend it to each other. And just last week, I met a guy who asked me to sign the book, and he actually was one of the first people who pre-ordered the book, and I was really excited. And as I sat there signing it, he was making excuses that there was no, there weren't that many little yellow post-its. There were some, but not that many. And apparently he was used to put in a lot of post-its. And he said, I was doing that. And then I realized you build a system in this book in order for me to find the most important part. And I didn't have to put post-its in. And I just fell silence, because he's seen it. He read the book and he'd recognized, the whole idea of making a brain-friendly book as well. So that was a moment of pure joy.
Well, the system was, and it took us a while to figure this out, but where you've got the borders on some pages so that they stand out from the side, and those are key
Yeah.
ones to read if you want to. Yeah, brilliant. Good to know that that worked. Right. Thank you.